what happened was, just to back up slightly, in the spring, after about a year and a half of being out trying to develop the project, and we're not faring so well as partners, my friend Hal Wilner rang me and said,
Right.
and Hal is a producer at Saturday Night Live for years.
Shout out Hal Wilner.
Yeah, and a great guy, music guy,
Yeah.
in town.
Also does great tribute.
It's great tribute.
Which is where this story's going.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I played on some of them.
Yeah.
So he said, I'm doing a
I
tribute.
did a Doc Pomus one with him once.
Fabulous.
Yeah, in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Lou Reed.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Hal calls me and says, I'm doing a tribute to Tim Buckley.
Right.
And I said, I love Tim Buckley. Are you kidding? I bought
Yeah.
his records. I played him actually on my radio show in college. He said, great. Well, listen, why don't you and Julia to come and why don't you do this song? I think he suggested a song, Where I Found the River. It's on a late Tim Buckley album.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked up a beautiful arrangement with her. And then he said, and by the way, his son Jeff has contacted us. I said, I didn't know he had a son.
Right.
Well, neither do we, but he's come forward, and I think you guys would be really good together. Now, this may have been generated by Jeff himself. I never asked Hal. I gotta ask him. I don't know if it was Hal's idea. But Jeff, when I met him, Jeff watched we went down to rehearse our song the day before.
St. Mark's Church?
Yeah, it was at the Brooklyn St. Anne's Church.
St. Anne's Church, okay.
Beautiful old church, and they had done a lot of interesting shows, like with the reunion of Lou and John Cale.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Songs for Drella Project,
Drella,
and Marianne
yeah.
Faithfull did a season there, a concert or two.
And they did a Berlin thing too with
wow.
with Lou, I think. Julian Schnabel, I think.
Wow,
at St. Anne's.
I never saw that.
I think so. I might be mistaken, but anyway.
So I go down there, and Jeff is hiding out in a pew in the church, slouched over watching us, but I didn't notice him.
Mm-hmm.
We just did our run-through for Hal. And he said, okay, great, it's going to be great. So I'm in the next room packing up. Julia is gone. This kid approaches me, and right away I'm like, this has got to be Jeff Buckley, because he looked just like the spitting image of Tim,
yeah.
but with his own look.
Mm-hmm.
He had long hair at this point, and he's vibing, he's flashing his eyes. He's like popping his... And he's like, you're Gary Lucas?
What's that mean, vibing, popping his eyes?
He's just sort of like...
Full of spirit?
Full of spirit, like I'm on fire, and like, whoa, like...
Lots of energy.
A lot of energy. So I got my attention, and then he was very complimentary. He said, I love your guitar playing. I read about you with Guitar Player.
Yeah.
I saw it.
And he went to GIT, right?
Also,
so he was like a guitar nerd.
He was. And I loved you with Beefheart. I'm a Beefheart fan.
Yeah.
So I was very taken by that, and I said, well, great. I'm really looking forward. Why don't you come over tomorrow, and we'll run through. Hal had suggested a song called The King's Chain from the Sophronia album, a very late Tim Buckley album. Beautiful song. So he showed up the next day, and I was prepared a loop, and I handed him a mic, and then he started singing, and I'm like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
What a voice.
What a voice.
And actually, at this time, I'd been really thinking, it's not working out with my female vocalist.
Yeah.
I want to get...
Well, also when Jeff Buckley enters the picture,
Also, it was like
it's like
I
that's
need a lead
little,
singer.
That's
and then
a little nutty. It's
here's
like
the guy,
one of the greatest singers ever.
Yeah.
Like, it's like
so,
that doesn't happen every day.
and I said to him,
so
Jeff,
nobody could fault you for having some confusing ideas at that point.
well, what I said was, Jeff.
Yeah.
So was that any good? He was really shy. When
Right.
we finished, I said, are you out of your fucking mind? Man,
Yeah.
you are a star.
Yeah.
That was incredible. And he was like, really?
Yeah.
I am? And yeah.
Yeah, you're about to inspire Radiohead and,
Listen,
like,
he
and
needed-
countless bands.
That's
and,
right,
like,
Coldplay.
You're about to inspire the way popular music goes
He
down, bro.
absolutely did.
Yeah, he did. And you.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and honestly, you too, dude.
Thank you.
I mean, no, you co-wrote a lot of those songs,
Did.
and those have inspired the way popular culture has gone. I mean, that's not smoke up
we
your...
got to do something, man. God damn it.
Listen,
Let's-
I'm ready.
All right.
I'm
I am
ready.
too. I am
I'm
too.
honest to God. I got a little project studio
Great.
upstairs.
Okay.
Let's
okay, we'll talk about that after this.
we're going to talk about it because
Okay.
we got to inspire where pop culture is going to go in 2050.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Anyway, so keep going
All
with
right,
the story.
so I said, let's go have lunch. So I took
Yeah.
him out to the White Horse, which they after all these years,
A White Horse Tavern.
They
still got that.
It's still there, but they've just sold it. They've got
Oh, it's going away.
No, they've opened it because it's landmark. They couldn't really change the front of it, but they've put in a new kitchen, and now it's like $35 entree. It used to be not very good hamburgers, and but it had a vibe.
Yeah.
So, it was my local, and I loved to sit there, and we're out at a picnic table out in front. It's a beautiful spring day.
Yeah.
And the first thing Jeff and I started talking about is, who's your favorite group? Who do you like?
And what did he say?
Well, we both came up very quickly with a short list of Led Zeppelin, the Smiths, and the Doors. All of them featuring these shamanistic singers, lead singers, and guitar heroes. So I was like, you know what? I've got this band, Gods and Monsters. He said, oh, I like that name. And I'm like, wow, somebody actually likes that name.
I like that name too, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's still there. And I think maybe I can get you in on this record. I'm supposed to be making this record for Columbia. And he said, I'd love to. I said, maybe you can sing on it too, or we could do something. I don't know. Like I was just testing the waters, and he was like, great. Then we went back to my apartment, and we jammed out our first song. I just had some finger-picking blues riffs.
Yeah.
And he just grabbed the mic and he improvised a song that became Bluebird Blues.
Yeah.
And by God, it was like magic, So I'm feeling really inspired and high from this. So.
No feeling like it when a creative
I've
creative
just felt like
collaboration
I'm
has
finally
magic.
on a good path here. Jeff and I, after that show, had a meeting where we got together and said, let's keep in touch. He was going back to L.A. I was off
back to GIT.
Yeah, well, I think he was done with it, but he had a
it's just like
he had a tape. He had a tape of
get what you pay for.
Well,
anyway,
he had a tape of early demos.
Yeah.
That he was trying to shop around L.A. and nobody was buying.
Yeah.
And he was bummed, but he was spending the summer trying to push them some further.
Right.
So I went off because Michael had organized the Knitting Factory tour, and that was wonderful. It was like 20 shows in 21 days, hopping all over Europe on planes and trains and buses, missing some connections, but some great times. And my first album had just come out called Skeleton at the Feast.
This was Gary
Lucas, the first one under my name. 1990.
Yeah.
And it got like fantastic reviews, 5 stars in
that's the one that was getting the good
Q,
reviews.
I think it was. Well, all of them got pretty good reviews over the years, but this is the first album was fantastic. So I'm all pumped up with this, wow. I had no idea it was gonna work like this with the live stuff. But then, I come back and I go call up the A&R guy. And I had said before I left, I had a meeting with the head of A&R, and I told him about Jeff, and I said, and he was like, why don't you just get her to sing 2 songs on the record? We'll use this Buckley kid. We'll use some old demos. He just wanted it out. Let's get this off the plate.
So it was. So Jeff was going to participate in Gods and Monsters?
Theoretically.
But it never happened.
Well, Julia was like, I don't want to make a record with Jeff. She was, sorry. She got very angry.
Okay, here's the $1 million question.
Right.
How come after your White Horse Tavern moment, didn't you call Julia up and say, listen, love you, but this is done.
Well,
goodbye. And then the follow-up question to that is, how do you regret not doing that? Not that you shouldn't regret anything.
Because I was trying to be ethical.
Yeah, that's the problem.
We had a contract.
Sometimes it's you got to make those bold.
I know, but
in life you can't be the nice guy. I've been plagued by people pleaser syndrome.
I just don't know if that would have worked either.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think it all worked out perfectly.
I think so. I mean,
I'm not trying to stoke regret, but I'm just trying to say
Listen,
you know.
I brought the subject up to her after my meeting, but see, even there, I felt like a betrayer because they called me in to have a meeting with the A&R guy, and then
Sometimes
if I'd
when
been
you
a
go
good
halfway, like it's like, oh,
well,
we'll
Jeff
bring
did
Jeff
this to
in
me
and-
later on. He had a meeting with Imago, you know,
Yeah.
and I found out about it after the fact, and I'm like,
Right,
how come I wasn't asked? It was the writing was on the wall then. So-
right. Like, because he was going to go solo and be
Yeah,
like a
or they
solo
wanted
singer.
him solo, and I was
Yeah.
just like an enabler to shoehorn him into that situation. So, but anyway, so in a way, it was like turnaround.
Which is
karma
kind of, I feel like a
is bitch.
mistake, actually, because the best stuff that he did was with you.
I love this guy.
Well, I mean, just
I'm
play.
proud of those stuff. If you
play-
listen to Grace and Mojo Pin, how this whole thing came about with Jeff.
Gary Lucas.
Hey, man.
Yo,
Big respect.
say hey to the peeps.
Thank you. I came back from that tour with the Knitting Factory artists, and I called up to find out what was going on with the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, I guess they had heard from Julia Hayward and her lawyer, who said, "We have a contract. What do you mean bringing in other people?" You know, like the head of A&R was like, "You should use Jeff. Maybe you can use some of these demos with this guy Rollo McGinty from the Wooden
Right.
Tops." So she had a lawyer who was like making angry
Threats.
sounds about it. So I called up, and then the head of the A&R department would not take my call,
Yeah.
and they put the junior guy.
That is how you. By the way, let me interject here because I've been down the same exact road.
man.
That's how you get dropped from a label, y'all. You don't. It's a lot like
They don't tell you.
They don't tell you. You're not. You just
Well-
the phone. You stop getting your phone calls returned.
Well,
that's what happens.
but then I
Like,
tracked down the
it's
junior
like-
guy. I got the junior guy.
Then when you start like having to track down
Right.
the junior guy,
The junior guy.
it's a wrap.
and
Like
he-
when the president used to like clamor to pick up your call,
Right.
and then all of a sudden now you got to track down the junior guy.
It's awful.
It's a wrap. It's a wrap.
This is horrible.
And
So-
you're still in denial about it by this point too.
Oh,
By
yeah.
the way, if
Oh,
you're
yeah, I
anything
can't
like me,
believe this is
yeah,
happening.
you're just like, what the fuck is it? It's like
Well-
getting dumped from somebody who's just like gypsy fading, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the junior guy said, "Well, Gary, I guess you probably heard the news." This
Yeah.
weaselly voice.
Uh-huh.
But we've decided to drop the whole thing.
And by the way, at that point they know that he hasn't heard the news. They're just saying like that's how you hear the
No,
news.
no, I hadn't heard the news. I
Yeah.
said, "What? You what?
Yeah.
How can you do that? We have a signed contract." And he
Uh-huh.
said, and I'll never forget this, "You can't afford to sue us."
Ooh, Weasley.
Which is a fact as
the
far as it
Weasley
goes,
guy,
but
yeah.
it's like the Weasley guy
The
said it
Weasley
in
guy.
a smug tone.
That's such a
Like,
Weasley guy thing to say.
What a horrible thing.
You know, the Weasley guy looks forward to saying things like that.
Yeah,
That's the
but-
thing.
oh,
He
God.
loves saying a thing like that. The Weasley guy.
And then he said, "Maybe we can have lunch."
Oh no!
So
That's the other thing the Weasley guy
Guys,
loves
I'll
to
take
say.
you to lunch.
Yikes! I'll
Yeah.
take you to lunch.
Oh, come on.
Hey,
man.
your consolation prize is going to lunch with the Weasley guy.
Hang for it.
Nah,
Hey.
nah. The Weasley guy will pick up the
He'll
tab.
pick up the tab.
He'll
This-
pick up the
consolation.
The
prize.
consolation prize. is-
So I got off the phone and my wife came over and said, "What?
yeah.
You got to get that
The
day job back. What are
fucking
you
Weasley
doing?" I mean,
guy.
I've been out a year and a half.
I know.
And I said, "Wait a second. My career didn't start or stop with that girl,
Boom.
and it isn't gonna start and stop now." And I got Jeff Buckley waiting in the wings.
Mm-hmm.
So I rang him up, and I told him what it went down, and he said, "I'll be your singer." In a high voice. He had a high speaking voice
I'll be your singer.
like that. And
Really?
I thought, a little bit.
But cooler sounding
I'll
high
be your
voice
si-
than that.
I can't
I'll
do
be
it.
your singer.
Yeah.
No,
It-
if you
I
imitate
can't
it,
do it, and I don't want. Look, it was
Yeah.
it was music to my ears,
Right.
whatever it was.
beautiful voice, whatever.
He
it
had a
was.
beautiful voice.
Yeah.
So I went to bed feeling a little bit better
Mm-hmm.
about this. God, I don't know if the same situation befell me now, what I would have done. But
Well, like that
I
moment
just-
is important. That moment that happens a lot in everybody's life across different professions is that moment of like right when something like dies into like the new hope of a new
Right.
thing.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? It's like that's an exciting
yeah,
eye of the tiger moment. I love those moments.
Well-
like because it's like I'm gonna win. I'm
Right.
gonna prevail. Over
that's how I
this.
felt. Like I
Yeah.
said, I have the talent. I'm
I
not going to
love
go
those
crawling back
moments.
to
Yeah.
that day job. So the very next day, I said, I've got to now write some songs. All we have is the Bluebird Blues.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to just play the guitar. And it was in the tuning I used for a famous Beefheart instrumental called Evening Bell that he gave me on the piano that I worked at on guitar. That's on Ice Cream for Crow. It's a drop D tuning.
Mm-hmm.
That was my lucky tuning. But the guitar was still in that tuning from the tour I just
That's
come
that
off
tuning
from.
right there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is basically normal E, B, G, D,
Right, just
A,
drop the D.
drop D.
Drop low E is now a D.
So you can get interesting chord shapes here. Like that would be an E minor chord.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I just started improvising. That's how I write songs.
Yeah.
And then when I was taping myself, when I heard something that sounded magical, I hit record, taped that little bit.
Yeah.
So eventually I started compiling an instrumental and fine-tuning it. And there were a couple times like, well, should I go, let's try this. I had already this music. Anyway, I sent him the cassettes with these instrumentals through snail mail. I mean, there were no MP3s. There was no internet.
There was no internet yet.
I just taped him on a cassette, said, here. He got them a few days later, and he called me, and he said, they're beautiful. All right, listen, I'm coming to New York, actually, in a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
He was playing the bass in a tribute. Well, it was a party band to promote a film called The Commitments.
Right.
But
the
this Irish band that
yeah.
breaks up in a week.
I remember.
Good film, Alan Parker film.
It was a good movie,
Yeah,
actually.
and he jumped off the bus that they were driving around the U.S. on, and he came over to my apartment, and he said, okay, play that again. Okay, now, you know, I gave little titles to these instrumentals. One was called And You Will. That became Mojo Pin.
Uh-huh.
The other was called Rise Up to Be.
Yeah.
That became Grace. And they were like self-help titles. They were like
Yeah.
power positive things,
Yeah,
trying
I
to
heard-
vibe him up. you
Yeah,
know?
well, and words I heard you say that before in another interview, and
Yeah.
and words do have power, and that's a great example of that.
Sure.
Like you imbued those songs with those powerful words, and it's like putting a magic spell on them.
I tried, you know.
Well,
I
it's
tried
true.
to, like, you know. But then, so he said, okay, here, just start singing. Start when I point. And he left the structure alone. And the instrumentals that I'd written gave him the riffs and the harmonic structure of these songs. The only modification was on Grace. He said, can you repeat this section? I feel there's some more lyrics that need to be here, like a verse. So I doubled one part. But that was the beauty of working with Jeff, is that he left my instrumentals alone,
Yeah.
fundamentally. Now, when he came to record the Grace album, he made a little bit of a change in some harmonies in the chords. And I've never learned them. I'm so stubborn. I go back and play them the way I wrote them.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the demos, and the demos is what got us in the door with a label called Imago that was a BMG subsidiary. They gave us enough money, like 20 grand, to
That's
bring
awesome.
Jeff to New York to write more with me. And then they said, we want a public showcase.
Shanae.
No, actually, it was St. Anne's came back and said, we want to debut this project because they love Jeff and
Right.
they love me at the St. Anne's Church in Brooklyn. So, and they gave us a date, Friday the 13th, March 92. And I'm a little superstitious.
I'm a lot superstitious.
So I should have backed out of that one. But I rolled with it, and Jeff and I wrote 12 songs after he moved to New York, right around New Year's. He was here, and he was living in the East Village.
Where in the East Village?
Gee, I don't know, with his girlfriend Rebecca Moore, though,
Okay.
someplace around here. And then he got his own place.
Yeah.
I never visited there. But he would come over to my apartment in the West Village
West
on a
Village.
daily basis. My wife and I would cook a little bit for him, or we'd make sandwiches.
Nice.
You know, we took him under our wing to try and make him feel comfortable.
You were kind of a mentor figure.
Yeah,
probably
definitely
a father
was.
figure to a degree.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I was on a real like streak of writing, and so I'd written in Europe. I'd gone on another tour, And so I always, during the tour, I was like, I got to be writing music for this project with Jeff. And so I'd compiled a bunch of instrumentals. And so we had a dozen songs. I put a band together based on the last version of Gods and Monsters, and we started to rehearse for the big showcase. And right away, Jeff got dissatisfied and said, I can't work with this guy and then the other guy. And I had to can him. And I was like, one of them warned me, you're next, man. It was a side I had not seen with Jeff before. It was very controlling and ruthless. But he was adamant they can't play my music. Now, it was disturbing to me, but I was like, I didn't feel like he was holding the cards as the singer, and this is
right.
something that's happened to me often with singers. Is just singers, it's like have their own psychologies as guitarists do too.
Yeah.
And I thought of it as Page and Plant, and we're gonna get up there and inspire each other.
Yeah.
And he thought of it as the Jeff Show, which is okay, but that wasn't my vision of the group going in. Plus, I'd already had this group operating under different formats for a couple of years. My name, Gods and Monsters. So anyway, we had 10 days to go. He brought in these two guys who'd been on the road with Bob Mould, and they're also fine players. Mm-hmm. And more on the rock tip. Mm-hmm. And they, to their credit, learned very complicated songs with a lot of time changes and key changes, tuning changes. In the space that we had intensive rehearsals. We went into that Friday the 13th concert. We got a 3.5-minute standing ovation from a sold-out St. Anne's Church.
That's amazing.
There was tension on stage. Like, Jeff didn't look at any of us. He was very nervous himself. But people loved it, and there was a lot of back slapping, not stabbing, from people who came backstage, and you guys are great. But there was like a distance, and I felt like there's something odd and here. And then the label didn't. They were like critical, like, they didn't like it. First of all, it was too loud for that church, so the acoustics sabotaged it. But I got the board tape. So you could hear Jeff clearly and my guitar clearly. Yeah. And it may not be the most balanced tape, but it sounds pretty rocking. It's a more rocking side of Jeff.
They thought you were too loud? Is that the...
They didn't say you, but the whole thing was probably... In hindsight, maybe we should have done it acoustically. I mean, Jeff was playing through a Marshall with his telly. So we had a double guitar thing going and thundering drums.
I'm just picking up on the narrative starts to become like... Jeff, you're getting overwhelmed by the band.
Yeah, that was going on.
Is that what?
And he felt it.
And the label was sort of whispering. They just didn't. They just wanted like it to be like.
Well, I think he made it clear to them honestly. Yeah. In those meetings without me. Right. That he really didn't see a future for it, and that he wanted a solo deal, and I think that was his agenda all the way. Right. And I was in denial, because that year I'd seen my project at Columbia blow up. So this was the phoenix rising from the ashes, and then, oh my God, it's going down the same road. Right. But with the singer now making the problem, so. Yeah. Well, in any case, this is all hindsight. The next day, just chronologically, my wife and I are listening to the playback of the DAT, and we're dancing around like, it sounds great. Even if Imago don't want this, we'll get another deal. This is awesome. The phone rings, and it's Jeff. Gary, I've thought about it. I don't want to go through this anymore. And I'm like, shattered. Right. So I'm in despair for a few months. I continue to try and lobby the group. We have a meeting. He's like, you stood up in front with me at one point when Mick and Keith play. Keith always stands behind Mick. Like, this was important to him. And I was like, Jeff, man, I thought we'd be like Page and Plant. That wasn't his vision of it. Right. So he felt like you had... Or there usurped was my role. It was ego. It was ego, but it was also.
But your ego too, like because you didn't want to go into the background.
Oh no! Right now, later when I saw him with his band, which I liked his band, I noticed that he had them all way in the back, in a little huddle, and they were all shoegazing. Nobody was like really looking up. He might have even said, "Don't look at that." And then he was over on the other side of the stage with the adoring girls. And so it was very much the Jeff show, and I thought this was a Roseland. Damn, I would not have been happy in this band.
You wouldn't have liked that.
No, because, but this is
But actually, like Mick and Keith does get up
sure
there.
He does.
I mean, it's like,
hey,
that's not
listen,
really true that it's
anyway,
like Keith has to stand
that's what I
in the back.
recall out of this.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we were young kids. I was older, but Jeff was 24 when this went down. It was just harsh. So,
well, just when the labels get involved, and then there's A&R,
they had their own opinions,
and then they're coming in and saying like, "Hey, we think this doesn't look like MTV, and we need."
Imago did not want to go forward with this, but
like what they should have been paying attention to is the songs y'all wrote.
Yeah, but they didn't even know what they had, and I brought a tape of the board tape to a final meeting with the Imago A&R woman, and she said, "I don't need to hear it. I was there." And Jeff said, "What do they know anyway? They're consumers." I said, "Well, we got a standing ovation." He dismissed that.
You know what? I'll say this about the modern music business is the modern music business would be, I feel like, wouldn't have these kind of prejudices about like age variations and look. Like it's not as conservative in terms of that.
But it was a video world.
But then it was the MTV video world, and it had to be a certain thing, and there was like 10 bands that made it, and if you didn't fit on that trademark look or whatever, then so those kind of things I think infected people's thoughts and visions a lot more than they would now. I think now people would just pay attention to like, hey, what are the tunes like? And hey, if you got a problem with, Gary getting into your stage space, well then like you can talk that out, and Gary can like maybe like, be more stage left a little bit, or whatever, and still rock, you know. Split the difference, maybe, But
I was a little proud, and I probably should have been more amenable, and I tried to be.
I'll say this: I don't think I think that you probably were fighting a losing battle because
I think he'd already made up his mind,
and I think also there was probably label voices coming into that.
Well, that's the next thing, like, because I did a few shows with Jeff to keep the thing going, a connection. He was my guest on 4 or 5 shows in that spring, and then we did a final show.
So y'all remained friends, kinda.
Well.
I
mean, tried to, but then
Yeah.
I said some stupid stuff that pissed him off. And
What'd you say?
Well, let's not go there.
Okay, we don't have to.
No, we don't have to go there.
I'm trying to be Barbara Walters over here now.
But it wasn't just me. You know, he said some stuff that irritated me, so we were on each other's backs.
Yeah.
And at the final show, this A&R guy from Columbia, who I knew as a product manager, showed up. And then the whole thing, the scheme fell into place. And Jeff was like, "Hello, New York." He was like grandstanding like for this guy at the show Tramps. And I was like, it's just a duo. And what the fuck? Then I realized he'd been talking to this guy all along, even while we were technically under a contract, which he had never signed. The contract with him, I was the only signatory. So they had no paper on him because he got a lawyer. And the lawyer said, if you sign that contract, once we try and shop your solo deal, once we ditch Gary and sign this, it was like an interim figure, and sign a solo deal, you may not get that deal because Imago have a matching clause that if they come up with the same money, they automatically get you. Don't sign it. So he had never signed it. So at the last meeting with Imago, they were like, "I only want to work with Jeff. I don't want to work with you." That was like bitter. But on the way out, we were still friends.
How many songs wound up on Grace that you co-wrote?
2.
Yeah.
And the first 2.
Yeah.
And they stand apart because sonically
they do
and
stand
otherwise,
apart.
They don't sound like any of the other songs.
They really do.
They're distinct, right?
They are distinct.
Yeah.
Their signature. They're what you think of when you think of Jeff. To me.
Hey, but if you heard some of these,
and I actually didn't know you wrote those riffs until
Well, they didn't go out of their way to advertise it. Let's put it that way. I mean, if you looked at the fine print, it said I got a co-write credit, and Jeff in the special thanks gives me magical guitarness. Thanks to Gary for magical guitarness. But nowhere was it volunteered anywhere. Oh, Gary wrote these riffs.
Yeah.
And so often people would assume, of course,
Jeff wrote
them. And I remember his manager meeting him at some show later on the next year, and he said, "Oh, Jeff just did the show in Glastonbury or someplace huge," and the mighty cheer rose up when he hit those riffs, and he just looked at me, and I was like, "Yeah." And did he tell anybody that I wrote? No.
And what's the other one?
Mojo Pin.
Yeah, play that one.
I played a little bit of it.
You already did. Oh, you played both those. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And it's got a bolero thing. I mean, they're very exciting rock songs. I was trying to bring forward lessons learned from the Doors, Led Zeppelin, and the Smiths, but bring it into the 90s. You know, this was the 90s. So the original, and then I'm very proud of the other. Now, there's an album called Songs to No One of early work, right? Did you ever hear that?
No.
Yeah, the Knitting Factory released some of the early demos and work tapes, some live tapes, and then there's 5 still that have never officially been released, 1 or 2 of which I think are right up there with Grace.
Hey, do you have more riffs like that and stuff?